Hey everyone, this is Mark Trankel with another episode of With Flying Colors, and I'm here with John McKechnie and Jeff Bassino. How you guys doing today?
Great.
John's probably a little better than I am.
A little bit.
It's interesting times, and so we are going to discuss today the impact on credit unions of the elections that happened yesterday. So we're recording this on November 6th. Yesterday, Donald Trump was elected to take over as president, and there's other positions in the Senate and the House that are changing hands. And as we speak, we know that the Republicans are also going to gain control of the Senate. It's still up in the air on the House, but they have a lead there. And some of these things are going to have elections have consequences, and it's going to impact how credit unions face the next 4 years. But before we jump into that, why don't we do some quick introductions? John, why don't you go first on your credit union background for those listeners who may not have heard you on the show before?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. And looking forward to this. And Jeff and I are old friends from our CUNA days as well as NCUA. I was a congressional staffer. I went to work for CUNA in 1980, when April Fool's Day, obviously, 1987. That makes perfect sense for me. Was at CUNA for 18 years. And then I became under President George W. Bush, I was named to a position with his administration as the head of congressional and public affairs at NCUA, which is where I got to know Mark, and was there for 5.5, I think, of the most eventful years in the history of our industry during the mortgage market crisis of the late 2008, 2009, 2010 era. And since 2011, I've hung out my shingle and I'm doing a lot of credit union advocacy work with leagues, individual credit unions, do some work with TrueStage, the insurance company, and one of the home loan banks, Federal Home Loan Bank. So I've kept my hand in the financial services world.
Very good. And it's hard once you taste it to let go because it's a lot of fun and it helps makes the economy run here and helps everybody in the country. So Jeff, a little bit of your background.
Oh, let's see. After meeting John originally, we were both at CUNA a long time ago in a galaxy far away. I was fortunate enough to be appointed by Bill Clinton to serve on the NC board. That's also where I first met Mark. And as the story I always tell, and if your listeners remember, you were the one who told me which parking space to take the first day on job.
You got to get a good spot in that lot. There's not many of them.
You said you took Norm DeMore's job. You might as well take his parking. So left NCUA and then was appointed by George W. Bush to be on the Federal Finance Board. So I do get some bona fides as a fairly bipartisan person.
There you go.
Since leaving the Finance Board, I've been off on my own. I have a company called Casino and Associates. It's always clever to use your own name. We do a handful of things. We run a couple of three trade associations, one for internal audit and risk folks, the Metropolitan Area Credit Union Management Association, and the National Council of Postal Credit. So, buddy,
Very good. Very good. And so yesterday we had the 2024 elections. And as I mentioned, former President Trump is going to become president again. And that will have some ramifications, some other things that happened. Sherrod Brown, however you pronounce it, he lost. He's the head of the banking committee. And then other things are happening in the Senate and the House. So let's just kick this off as what do you see happening moving forward, and how do you see this impacting the credit unions, that the 4,600 credit unions out there once these changes take effect?
I'll tell you what, John, I'll defer to Agent and tell her that you got both on me, so you go first.
That's very kind of you. I'll tell you a quick funny story. So years ago, there was a super lobbyist here in DC named Tommy Boggs. He was like considered to be the most well-connected lobbyist. His father had been House Majority Leader. His sister, some of you may remember, being a TV personality, Cokie Roberts on ABC News. But he was considered to be the best lobbyist in town. His connections were mainly on the side. And when the Democrats lost the control of the House in 1994, after 40 years of control, a reporter walked up to him the day afterward and he said, "Hey, Tommy, what do you think of the Republican taking the majority? What's that going to mean for Washington?" He goes, "I don't know. I've only been a Republican for about a day." This place changes hands occasionally. I will also say, before I directly address Mark's question, the toxicity of the way that the political process has evolved in the last 20 years, I think since the Bush Gore 2000 race, where everything just was so tight. And I think a lot of hard feelings, plus the prevalence of the internet has made people more tribal in their thinking. I, for one, Jeff and I are of different parties, but get along. And we like to have discussions and debates and try to convince somebody and persuade somebody. After Trump was almost assassinated this summer, I was in a restaurant that night and a waitress said, "I'm sorry the guy missed." I didn't sign up for this to be in a system where you try to kill your adversaries. That's not what we do in this country. So I hope everybody calms down and just realizes there are more important things than a campaign. And frankly, after it's all said and done, we're all Americans. Let's just live good lives and get stuff done. That's my soapbox. I'm gonna also say, I think for credit unions, there's going to be some obvious differences on the Hill. Democrats in the majority in the Senate, Sherrod Brown was a good friend of credit unions. My Ohio credit union friends really did have a great relationship with him. I think now that the Republicans have majority there, it looks like they're going to try their hand at tax reform next year. And I think both of you know how important that is to our industry. And I think I'm going to stop for a second and let Jeff get in here. But I think credit unions need to really roll up their sleeves and get ready for a potential tax fight, because the bankers have, if anything, turned up the volume on their attacks. And unfortunately, I think they have some people on the Hill who are listening. And maybe some of the Republican members are a little bit more friendly toward the smaller banks. So we're going to have to, I think we got great arguments, don't get me wrong, but we're going to have to work a little bit next year. Jeff?
I think John's absolutely. Funny thing is, we are of opposite parties. We are still friends. We are, in the words of Will Ferrell, we're old school. We are the ones understand that, in a way, this is all-star wrestling to a degree. I don't think a lot of people get that. I remember I had a friend who worked on Hill. He worked for Senator Jim Bunning. And at one point he said there were three people he trusted. There was lobbyists at the American Bankers Association. There was lobbyists at the Independent Insurance Agents of America, and me. He repeated this line enough that someone came to me and said, "What do you have on Rick Robinson? Rick keeps telling everybody you're the only three he trusts." I said, "You want to know something? I don't know." But Rick would also call sometimes the ABA lobbyist, or I would pick on him. And he once said to me, he goes, "What is this? The Lobbyist Employment Act of whatever year we were in?" And it just got us to the point where you realize, yes, that we can get along. Nobody gets along. It's the problem. John's absolutely right. When Republicans come in, it's going to be different. And look, we figured out 4 years ago, Trump was different. He was a different breed of cat, as you'd like to say. No offense to anybody who lives in Springfield, Ohio. But the reality is that things are going to be different. And when you're looking to pay off the deficit that we have and what shortfall, anything is fair to you. And I understand that as credit unions, John and I have been doing this a long time. There's a lot of times when you kind of raise the specter of it, people get all excited, but it's truly not there. I will tell you, I agree 120% with John.
Ever since the middle of this year, you've been hearing a constant drumbeat on Capitol Hill from really both Democrats and Republicans that because the 2017 tax law is going to expire in 2025, both parties want to get tax reform done. They have different priorities. But one thing that I have heard from the tax writing members of Congress, Democrat and Republican, is that they're going to take a 360-degree look at all the exemptions. And some of those people have looked me right in the eye and I've been with credit union people in these meetings, and they've said to their credit unions, "Look, I'm not interested in putting you at the top of the list of entities that need to be taxed, but I am saying that you're going to be under the microscope just like everybody else." And a Democrat said a 360-degree review is going to happen. About a half an hour later, I was with a Republican and he used the same terminology. I think we don't have to be afraid. I don't like to go into this business or anything on Capitol Hill with fear, but we have to be vigilant. I think we have to be concerned for the reasons Jeff said about the need for money that could help plug the deficit hole. I was on the Hill in 1986 when Ronald Reagan and Dan Rostenkowski brokered this famous tax bill. I think you could have a similar dynamic in that people of both parties want to get something done.
I think it's
Yeah.
Mark, you're right. We don't
No,
know
no.
where the house is.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Say that again.
With house, we don't know where the house is. But if Trump enjoys a trifecta, it becomes a lot harder to stop things once they get started, if they get started, majority. If Republicans are the ones bringing it up and no one's willing to step in, a long time ago, Dork raised up, but he raised up as a Democrat with a Democratic House. It's a lot easier. A Democrat rising Republican House doesn't get the same consideration.
Sure.
So,
Sure. Yeah. The gridlock, if they control everything, there's no gridlock. And once it's
well,
baked in,
not a whole lot of people can stop. So,
right.
Yeah.
And you talk about the one, I want to say one thing on the tax. What comes to my mind is the importance of America's Credit Unions, CUNA's GAC this year, because what you guys taught me was that the turnout that the credit unions get when they show up and they go see their congressman is huge. And that's a very powerful tool, generally speaking, but probably this year is if you're said another way, if your credit union can afford to go this coming year or one of the next 2 years, you might want to focus on this year.
That's a great point, Mark. And I would just say that the expectation on Capitol Hill is that they're going to try to do something on tax reform pretty quickly in the new year for a number of procedural reasons. So, look, I have a lot of faith in the credit union movement. I have a lot of faith in our people's ability to be very persuasive lobbyists. The best advocates we have are not people like Jeff and I, it's the credit union people from back home.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
would extol the virtues of them getting involved and staying involved. And there really is no substitute for visible credit union activists making our case.
One other thing that what one other thing that one of you brought up was 2000, I think, Jeff. And at that point in time, when Bush won and beat Gore, and the board was it you, Yolanda?
two Democrats, one Republican,
Yeah. And I just remember when I was a deputy executive director, Dennis Dollar knew he was going to be becoming the chair and the paperwork was going to move quick. And I went down to his office and he said, don't do anything in a wheat administration that you don't think a Dollar administration would want in, 4 weeks, because I know I'm going to be in charge. He goes, so keep flying that plane around the airport. And so those types of things are starting to fall into the minds of the staff at NCUA, right? Because Chairman Todd Harper is Chairman Todd Harper. But come January, once Trump gets his sea legs and starts figuring out what his first priority to sign is, the second priority, you're going to see Kyle Helpman become at least interim chair of NCUA, right? Any thoughts on those machinations and whatnot?
This one I'm going to grant first, since I remember what it was like to be there. Look, back then in 2000, Yolanda Wheat was made chairman. I think she was chairman for about a month, but it was pretty.
It seemed like a year, Jeff.
It did seem like a while, but people she hired let go. But look, I knew there were two Democrats and one Republican on the board. We had a Republican president. That'd be the smartest sometimes, but I figured at some point Dennis Dollar was going to be the chairman, and sure was. He had the qualifications, he had the connections, so it was a given thing. Now, as I've said often in the past, it's great. Dennis and I saw had similar views on credit unions, which is why we tended to side along the same lines. He used to call me a free market Democrat. I still honor. But the difference I think you have now is you probably will have Kyle Hop think again, since Trump's been around the block once, he's going to know that on January 20th or 21st, there's going to be a blanket order. So that every agency has two Republicans. Here's the Republican, one Republican, then Republicans to chair. The only difference that Kyle's going to face is he's staring down the same gun that Todd was. And that he didn't have the votes.
Right.
So he can still get outvoted. He can be the chairman in name only, which in reality is what Todd had to do first. What was it, a year and a half?
Yeah, he was a minority chairman, and I think you both have hit on the right answer about the likelihood. Although nothing's guaranteed, I know that there are no certainties in Washington, but I think that it's very likely that incoming President Trump is going to make a lot of personnel changes. I have heard through I have a window into the Trump administration people. Before the election, these people were talking about transition. Now they're actually really talking about it. But some of the things they've said is that agencies that are headed by people who are Biden appointees they're going to be replaced by Trump appointees. NCUA doesn't rate high enough to hear anybody say, "Oh yeah, we're going to go after NCUA." But I think it's reasonable to expect on January 20th or somewhat shortly after, the president may look at that and remove Todd. He can do that with a stroke of the pen. He doesn't have to go through. He can name Kyle Haltman as chairman without having
Yeah.
Senate.
Great point.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Mr. Haltman, from what I've seen sitting in the audience and any conversations I've had, he seems to be much more of a deregulatory, a typical Republican philosophy, less regulation, a little bit skeptical of additional regulation. He has openly disagreed with Chairman Harper on things like overdraft protection. I think he probably has some skepticism about third-party vendor. We'll see. But the point is, I think change is in the air. And our agency, plus I think CFPB, is probably going
Yes.
to have changes also. So there's some stuff's going to happen.
Yeah, that's the CFPB reference. That's spot on. And consumer compliance. Chairman Harper is big on consumer compliance. You mentioned share drafts. They've got the budget. They just issued their budget. They're doing their budget briefing in November. He will vote. This will be, ironically, his first vote where he's had two Democrats to get what he wants. And then shortly thereafter, he will be a board member, but not the chair if what we're saying plays out, which I'm certain it will.
But Mark, Mr. Haltman's term is expiring in August. So he may, and underline the word may, he may only be chairman from January until August, or the president could decide if he's doing a good job, I'll keep you right in that seat. But
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And so with that August term coming up, then you get into, okay, who gets slotted to, if he does go, maybe he goes somewhere else and Haltman goes do something else and someone comes in here. They have that transition team. It'll be who's on that transition team is sometimes a hint at who could be coming in. I think Debbie Matz was on a transition team at NCUA and came back. If I'm not mistaken, Frizel, the same thing. So between then and August, he may be a short time, Haltman may be a short time acting chair, and then shortly to follow after that. But the consumer compliance side of it, I will say, I'm still digging into NCUA's budget. I was anticipating Chairman Harper would maybe go more aggressive changes in staffing on consumer compliance. There were some modest tweaks to that, less than I thought based on some of his statements might be coming.
I agree. I was a little surprised by that myself. I didn't expect it to go light on that. I thought he was going to go, especially on the fair lending side.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So there's not the budget challenges that not having two votes as a Republican are not as big as they might have been had it been more of a land grab and adding staff. So Jeff, any thoughts on that?
I think you both are absolutely right on this because that has been one of Todd's focuses. Again, when it was Rodney and Kyle and Todd didn't have the votes. So you could put it in there, you weren't working again. And to this, Todd's a good politician. Nothing against some of the previous chairmen a little before him, but sometimes it didn't help to get into a shouting contest. A already had the votes, or B didn't have the votes. It doesn't do any good. And while in the past, I think Todd could have been a little more assertive with comments, he wasn't. He was more measured. I think he, again, politically understands it's a long game. I will say this, Kyle's term, as you both said, is up in August of 25. But all three of us know, especially you, Mark, as you were there through this process, the chairman slot holds a different allure for potential nominees than just a board member slot. Okay. So and as it stands right now, Kyle's seat would be the chairman slot. It's the only Republican slot. So when his term is up, that person's like chairman. And so it would be very interesting to see what this brings up in woodwork. Potential need. I will say this, and again, the last three board members, the current board members, were all Capitol Hill staffers before. And this is the first time we've had Capitol Hill staff. Okay. We've had credit union people. We've had what we call friends of the president, some Elizabeth Burkhart or Shirley Bonet. Then you've had people that were connected politically to the president, but knew credit, Dennis Dollar, Dave Chatfield, myself, and that we knew credit unions.
I'm back right. Let me go to bat right here. We need a credit union person on this board. There's a prohibition in the law against having more than one, but we don't have any. I think
yes.
we should rewrite the Federal Credit Union Act to say that there should be at least there could be no more than one, but no less than one either. Because we need a perspective of somebody who has sat behind the desk, a CEO or a board member of a credit union. We just need somebody with industry experience who can balance some of the viewpoints that are important when the board makes decisions.
That's
Well,
a
I
great
think when
point. And I just want to say on the chair being an apple that someone's going to want to grab. And as you guys know, remind the listeners, Federal Credit Union acts as the chairman is the spokesperson of the agency. While the board votes on things, there are powers that that are built into the delegations where the chairman can issue the letters to credit unions, control that. He or she's the final say relative to that. So while it's 1/3 of the votes, it's a very powerful position, the way that the agency is structured, in a way just being the chair works based on the Federal Credit Union Act. Jeff, you were going to say something.
Well, I'm going to kind of pick up John's thought. It is obviously we would like a credit union person there. Say this. Luckily, for example, I don't think Kyle came in huge knowledge of credit. He had financial services, but he brought Sarah Knapp, who obviously it's deep reservoir of experience. And so sometimes you could cut for it. But I will say, I agree with Jim's point. We should have one person to credit unions because frankly, it takes a while for anybody new that isn't familiar with the industry. And obviously now we just got America's Credit back with the TUNA, AFQ, AccuAll, Qs. We had a whole alphabet soup of name that someone had to know. Again, I had a benefit. Dennis he'd worked. Frizzell had a benefit. He had worked with them as a state worker. But if you haven't, it takes you a while. So it'd be great to have someone who has credit union experience. But as I said, I think credit unions have to understand that job coming up in August, Kyle's, and as John said, if Kyle's doing a great job, you get to stay until your successor is confirmed.
Mhm. The president, by the way, you reminded me that because you will have a president who's Republican, the Senate, which is majority Republican, that may make it more apt for Trump to say, look, I can get one of my new people confirmed through a Republican Senate easier than I can. Just if we had a Democratic Senate tomorrow or next year, the president may just be more inclined to leave Mr. Houtman in place because he might have trouble getting him through a Democratic Senate. With the Republican Senate, though, who knows? The president will have, I'm sure he's got a whole pile of resumes on his desk as we speak. One other thing I want to mention about the Senate Banking Committee. Tim Scott, who's a very capable senator from South Carolina, Republican, will ascend to the chair of the Senate Banking Committee unless he decides to accept a Senate administration appointment. And I want to say something about Tim Scott. South Carolina, conservative Republican, African American. He served in the House before he became a senator. And the district he represented from the House was Charleston, downtown Charleston, South Carolina. That's the district where the Civil War started. And I've always been impressed by the idea that district where that history occurred was able to elect a conservative Republican. It shows how much attitudes and thoughts and perceptions have changed. And I feel good about that. That's a sign that maybe the country's getting better on certain issues.
That's a great point. That's a great point. So, guys, any other thoughts, material things that pop into your head? John,
Guess who's going to be the number one Democrat on the Senate Banking Committee? You had Sherrod Brown defeated. Second ranking Democrat on the Senate Banking Committee is a guy named Jack Reed. He's also currently the chairman of the Armed Services Committee. He ain't going to give up that job to take banking, I promise you. Third would be Mark Warner, Virginia senator, who Jeff knows. And he's somebody who is chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He's not going to relinquish that role. Following him is John Tester from Montana, who was defeated last night. So guess who the fifth ranking Democrat is on the Senate Banking Committee?
I get to guess.
Yes. Go ahead.
Is it a senator from Massachusetts?
Yes, it is. What's her name?
oh
Elizabeth
dear,
Warren.
Yes, it is. Elizabeth Warren.
If this were Jeopardy, I would say, who is Elizabeth?
Yeah. She's going to be the top Democrat on the banking committee. She is definitely going to stir the pot, for better or for worse. She is a force already, but now that she's going to be the top Democrat, it'll be interesting. And
you think she might have some things to say about CFPB if that all plays out?
yeah, maybe.
The Democrats, if they are in the minority in both the House and the Senate, obviously just become the loyal opposition party. Better term. And the danger is, and especially with the non-cloture number for Supreme Court nominees appointments. I saw where Mitch McConnell came out today and said, keeping the filibuster. To be honest with you, to me, the filibuster ended when Harry Reid changed it from 60 to 51 presidential appointments with the promise we aren't going to do this for Supreme Court justices. And then a handful of years later, we did it for Supreme Court justice. So my point is, you can have the filibuster in place. It's interesting. But the reality is where it used to come in play, as John knows, were both appointments where somebody didn't want somebody, or Supreme Court justices. For that, you just need Robert Bork. Now see you've got Bork if you don't get in after you were nominated. So Democrats are really in a tough spot. And frankly, even if Elizabeth Warren is the ranking member, she's the ranking minority member. She's not the chairperson. And
Right.
that takes with it a lot of influence, and you basically just get to kick and scream a lot. And then that's it.
She's good at that.
Yeah. The next 2 years is going to put a premium on us being really sharp, really up our game. And when I say the entire industry, everybody's got a role to play. A lot of work to be done, I think. And with the new administration and new Congress, we're going to have some interesting days ahead.
And it just, you and I both know that the historic trend is that midterms of president usually suffer losses in both the House and Senate. And obviously in 2 years, I know we just had the election yesterday. So God forbid I speak of it. The Democrats have a much more favorable map in terms of Senate races. And John's absolutely right. What you have to be careful of is can't let the pendulum swing too far for you, because the same people that are ranking minority members in 2020 could be the chairman in 2027. And so you also have to P's and Q's in that state as well.
And so the Trump administration has 2 years to get things done. And I guess it's connecting to something I think John said earlier, because they've been there once, they understand the importance of speed and how to move quickly. Which also plays into moving the tax situation quickly, right? They know they've got 2 years before the next election and they know how to do it better. So things could happen quick.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing is obviously Trump, this is his second term. It's not consecutive. So I think he's only the second president. But you know that he's got 4 years. That's it. This is almost like being governor of Virginia, one term.
Sure.
And you do everything you want. And you don't have to worry about reelection. So in a way, he doesn't have to worry about running again. And yet at the same time, starting in 2027, which is historically 2 years out from the election, everybody knows, okay, you're a lame duck. So then you start the succession party as who's going to take over, things like that. So it's going to be a very interesting couple of years of creating it really. And I know that John does a lot of he does very well. I know he's going to stay on top of it. We're both hired. The people they want to hear from, credit. So stuff like the GAC is like the Hill visits are important. Staying in touch with members when they're back in the district is important. Credits just need to make sure.
Fantastic advice. John, any other last thoughts as we wrap this up?
I was up almost all night, so I think I'm about to fall asleep on the keyboard here. I apologize.
The only thing I would say is House is not officially so, but if it is, and with Patrick McHenry retiring, who takes over House Financial Services?
Yeah, that's a real jump ball. You've got, I think, last I've heard from both Democratic and Republican sources on the Hill is that they expect the House to be 223 Republican, 223 to 212 in favor of the Republican. So that's a majority, which coincidentally is what this last Congress started at. So it was tight at the beginning of the 118th Congress. There'll be the same numbers in the 119th. I think the Republicans are going to keep it. And you're going to have a real Donnybrook to get to be the chair of the Financial Services Committee between really four very competent, popular guys. Brent Hill from Arkansas, Andy Barr from Kentucky, Frank Lucas from Oklahoma, Bill Huizenga from Michigan. Those guys all are trying for it, and we'll see who comes out ahead next week because they're going to have their leadership elections.
Now, what about Ways and Means?
No, he's not going to. I don't think he's going to try. It's going to be Jason Smith again, although Mr. Buchanan tried, but I think he's going to step back and let Jason Smith chair, I think.
That answered my question. I usually go to John when I want to get answered.
That's
What the
right.
hell?
Guys, this was fun. I only have one other thing. And Jeff, I wanted to let you know that Sam Darnold is a free agent at the end of the year in case the Bears are ready to move on from Caleb Williams. I know
Love
it's early, about halfway, but anyway,
Again, I'm very
any
happy.
thoughts?
I'm very happy with Caleb Williams. He is the future of the Bears. And we figure out a way to pry with Ben Smith from the Lions to probably take over for Eberflus. If we could do it mid-season, I'd be happy to, but it's got a funny feeling. It's hard to get an assistant to quit and take another job. Like,
Well, Eberflus might get Caleb hurt. He keeps him running around back there.
that's,
Well,
I mean,
and from my perspective, I'm a Ravens fan. We're so sick and tired of Lamar. We can't. We'll unload him. If anybody,
That's tough.
yeah, he's having such a tough season. We're pretty fortunate.
out of the three of us, you're the only one that's really said it quick. I think I am. And I wonder if you got to just decide, do you want Sam or you want to bring JJ in?
I'm ready for JJ. I like Sam. I appreciate what he's doing. Last week we had the full Sam Darnold experience, 2 crazy interceptions and about 5 amazing passes. But let's bring on JJ. It's gold.
Well, I'm keeping Caleb. And if
Yeah, you
if,
should. You
if
should.
Ryan
He's talented.
if Ryan Poles, the Bears general manager, watches this, he's more than happy to call me. I'll give you my number, Mark. He can reach out to you.
You should keep him. I think he's the 3rd most talented rookie from this class.
Nice try. Oh my God, I cannot wait to get a new coach and to start riding the Vikings.
Next year you can remind me of these statements when
I will, because you know what? This is all taped. I want you to.
it's all we have recording. All right, guys. I really
Take care.
appreciate your time. And listeners, I want to thank you for listening. This is Mark Treichel signing off with Flying Colors.